Familiar, MEPA is a globally recognized program jointly administered by the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, UNITAR, and International IDEA, and it's designed to equip professionals with the expertise needed to navigate the complexities of electoral policy and administration. It's fully online and it's offered in English, French, Arabic, and Portuguese. The program also provides a rich learning experience combining both expert-led instruction with simulations, case studies, and interactive discussions to bridge theory and practice. So I'm sharing the link to the program webpage in the chat now. Additionally, I would like to also let you know that there are scholarships, referral discounts, and partial fee reductions available based on different criteria, including the She Votes Africa initiative, which specifically supports women in electoral leadership, and particularly in the Horn of Africa. With that, it is my privilege to introduce Professor Lorenzo Gaspari, Director of the MEPA program and an esteemed scholar in international law. Under his leadership, the program continues to shape the next generation of electoral professionals. Professor Gaspari, the floor is yours. Thank you in advance.
Thank you, Maribel, for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. Welcome to the webinar, Breaking Barriers to Gender-Based Violence on Women's Electoral Participation in the Horn of Africa, a cross-generational dialogue on live experience. So I'm truly excited to have the opportunity to launch this webinar, also as part of the She Votes Africa initiatives, was mentioned by Maribel 1 second ago, which is an initiative financed by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a project that takes place in the context of the Master in Electoral Policy and Administration. And together with Maribel, I also invite you to look further in our website to discover all of our initiatives, including the scholarship based on the She Votes Africa initiatives. So, but I'm grateful to the MEPA wonderful team to enact this important project, to organize this important project, in particular to Maribel, the didactic coordinator, and to Melvis Dilose, our head tutor, and today the moderator of this wonderful panel. Melvis has a long experience on research and consulting for international institutions, such as International IDEA, the African Union, UNDP, to mention just to mention a few. And also she has an extensive academic experience on democratic governance, peace and security, and the rule of law. In 2017, she was a Yale World Fellow, and she earned her PhD at Sant'Anna in Pisa. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the moderator, to Melvis, to start the webinar. Thank you so much for everyone again. Melvis, please.
Thank you, Professor Lorenzo, for giving me the floor. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on your time zone. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for this webinar on breaking barriers to gender-based violence and women's electoral participation in the Horn of Africa. It's really intended to just be a cross-generational dialogue on lived experiences. And we have put together a very distinguished set of panelists, people who have a wealth of experience in the issue, the subject matter, and would basically be sharing their lived experiences as well as the lessons they have learned from this. As we all know, like the rest of Africa, the Horn of Africa constitute the largest, women in the Horn of Africa constitute the largest number of the electorate, but yet they continue to face, different types of marginalization and violence, be it structured or overt, in their participation in electoral and political processes. And so we thought that we should have this meeting together today just to reflect on how the trends are evolving and bring in different generations to see whether there's been any change, or whether the younger generation are still going through what other generations have been through, what is new, and what can be done differently. So the goal of this webinar is really, we have like a fourfold objectives, basically to identify what are some of the drivers, reflect, on policy recommendations and how to strengthen the different networks between those who are working and studying these issues. Like the MEPA students will be using the word MEPA, but it really means Masters in Electoral Policy and Administration, which is a master's program that is offered at Scuola Sant'Anna. So we have 3 panelists today. Miss Halima Ismail Ibrahim, who is the former chairperson of the National Electoral Board in Somalia, Electoral Commission in Somalia, should be joining us. I don't know if she's online yet, but we also have with us Miss Bina Maseno, the executive director of Badili Africa. She's from Kenya. I'll introduce her when it's her turn to speak more detailedly. And we have Madame Bisawork Ketete, who is a member of the National Electoral Board in Ethiopia. A panel, a webinar this morning, afternoon would unfold in two sets. So the first would unfold along two thematic areas. The first thematic area would focus on the basically lived experiences around the root causes and manifestations and the impact of gender-based violence and women and how it impacts women electoral participation. And then the second thematic area of conversation would be around the strategies for resistance, as well as the solutions that can emerge from these different conversations. So the first part would be more diagnostic, and the second part would be more policy or oriented. We would move things a little bit around. I know the first person on our panel today would be Madame Bisawork. She has over 30 years of experience in poverty reduction and development work, as well as managing governance portfolios in social issues around social accountability and basically civil society support. She's a member of the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia since mid-2019. And she's overseeing the gender and social inclusion portfolios, as well as external partnerships with NEBE. In the Horn of Africa, in particular, she has worked with different international aid organizations, has over 12 years as senior governance program advisor and manager, and has worked, as well with the Irish aid in this capacity. So we are very pleased to have her here today. And just to reflect on these issues, my first question to her would just be, again, based on your experience, Madame Bisawork, we're very happy to have you here with us. Based on your personal experience, what reflections do you have concerning the broader impact of electoral violence on women's participation in democracy?
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
So I currently work as one of 5 board members of the National Election Board of Ethiopia, and relates to the subject that we're discussing. One of the 2 departments under my oversight, if I may say, is gender equality and social inclusion. So we try to look at some of these issues that we are actually trying to discuss today in relation to elections. I would like to emphasize that in relation to elections, my experience is really based on my work with NEBE, the National Election Board of Ethiopia. Of course, I've also worked in Rwanda for about 4 years, but not in an election context, but working for an international NGO, and I mentioned that with reason. So I think in terms of before I go into the personal experiences, I think it's important to remember that at the root of all gender-based violence remains the prevalence of gender inequality. Historically, it may vary from country to country, but it's still one of the fundamental causes. And then you have obviously the patriarchal societies and attitudes that we've had for a long, long time. Some of them still persist today. And then, of course, historically, the imbalance of opportunities also is another factor that I think when we have these discussions that we need to keep in mind. And then obviously, and this is why I referred to my stay in Rwanda, is when we are in a situation of conflict and war, then everything becomes more compounded, more difficult, and so on. Now, personally, thankfully for myself and sadly for this discussion, I haven't had personal experiences as such of GBV in my personal life. But most of my work, almost all of my work, included targeting gender issues. If you remember, in the 90s, and even now, leaving no one behind, community-based programs, empowering women groups, and so on. But I think I'll come back to that in a minute. It doesn't mean that I haven't had my dose of the usual attitudes from male colleagues, male employers. Let's see what you've got, kind of attitudes, but not serious. I mean, I'm sure my sisters from Kenya and Somalia will have a lot more. Maybe will have a lot more to say on that. Now, having said this, I think the fact that there wasn't a personal a serious personal experience has its own lessons. And I say this because, one, it shows that women and other groups with special needs need opportunities. You have to have opportunities offered. It could be family, it could be society, it could be your peers, it could be your employers. So that safe space opportunity is critical. Secondly, education. It doesn't make or break the fact that you can face GBV or any form of violence, but it's very important. It's very critical in the path in this theme. And then, of course, based on these opportunities and experiences that I thankfully have had, and I think many women need and should have, the personal choices that you make. And I'll just give you some examples. For example, in the international NGO that I was working with, I was the first female Black program manager in this particular NGO. And then in Rwanda, I was the first female Black country director in this international NGO. And now, like you said, I've moved on to work with NEBE and all the experiences that I've had, particularly in the CSO sector, but also in the international sector, so to say, where you have these opportunities to understand these concepts, to get lots of trainings, to interact with people. So opportunity matters, is what I wanted to say. Now, if I may move on to the second issue that you mentioned, the impact of electoral violence on women's participation in democracy. I think it's very important to understand. I think it varies from country to country. There are similarities for sure, and I'm sure we'll hear from Kenya and Somalia. It's very important to understand the barriers and the drivers of violence and how they change over time with social media and so on. So it's very important to understand that. And in that context, I would like to share here that we did, by we, I mean the National Election Board, we did an assessment on violence against women during elections. And it was very interesting because in terms of findings, it was, in my view, disappointing because the findings of electoral violence towards women during elections didn't come up as we thought it would. But the issue here is this kind of violence. We are very familiar with violence of other forms, kidnappings, rape, and other, sexual harassment. With those concepts, we're very familiar. When we talk about violence during elections against women, then it becomes a totally seemingly alien concept. But we know personally women, our former chairperson faced that herself. So we know that there are these examples, but somehow it didn't come out as much as we thought it would, but it did give us some pointers. The first one is that it's very subtle. During elections, it's very subtle. So we have to, we're thinking of how what other, rather than just formal assessments and research or surveys, what other innovative mechanisms can we use to actually find out more about what type of violence occurs during elections. So some of the women the researchers talked to, shared things like, if violence during elections is so disastrous on our male colleagues, brothers, husbands, and friends, God forbid for women. So there's a tendency to in a way share roles, stay behind, take care of the family while the men are in politics or in elections. Another impact is also apathy. What's the point? And then another impact is less visible roles, and I would mention here that we have about almost 70 political parties, and none of them have women leaders. None of them are led by women as we speak. Now we've tried, and we'll come back to that when we talk about the strategies. We've tried some mechanisms. Some of them have worked, some of them have not. So again, as we speak, we are reviewing our proclamation, and we are including some more bold and more constructive provisions within the law. So, women as voters have faced violence, as candidates have faced violence, as political party members or supporters, as political party leaders, as observers, as civic and political education providers. So the list is quite long. And then on top of that, you have the whole issue of intersectionality, where again we are also trying to understand more what kind of challenges or what kind of violence do women IDPs, women with disabilities face. So we've started to do some studies around that, and this VAWE study that we commissioned a while ago flagged, violence of a psychological nature, physical, sexual, economic, but I still feel we probably might need to repeat such an assessment so that we understand throughout the electoral cycle what kind of violence do women face, in the pre-election cycle, during elections, and after elections. So maybe I'll stop there with these two questions. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for those very deep and insightful reflections and the findings of the work that you have done on the various the impact especially of gender-based violence on women's political participation and democracy, democratic consolidation in general. Thank you so much. We'll move over to our next panelist, Ms. Bina Maseno. She's a young person. She's a woman from Kenya, and she has an extensive experience as well in terms of just so much she's been doing a lot of advocacy work in this area. She's the founder of Badili Africa, as I mentioned earlier, which sort of merges beauty and with different kinds of dialogues around political awareness and involvement in governance. She's active in building the capacity of women, young women and girls to participate in different political issues. She actually ran for office when she was 22 years old, 22, 23, if I remember correctly. And one of her famous lines, which I have really just come to quote in different spaces, is something she says, that as a young person, we have no choice, but we have to engage in political processes. And she said that you may not have interest in politics, but politics will always have interest in you. So you're either an actor, or you're either acting or you're being acting upon. And we're very pleased to have her here today, joining us from New York, where she's attending different activities around civil society women, civil society engagement with the United Nations. And we're just really thankful to have you here today, Ms. Bina, and would like for you to just reflect, share us, what was it like running for candidate at age 22, and what was your experience like on the topic of discussion. Just highlight some of the unique and specific challenges faced by young women in political participation, and how this impact that Ms. work has shared, how you experienced that in your work and journey. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible, Prof?
Yes, you are.
Fantastic. So thank you everyone who's joining us for this call. And I think for me, it's an honor to be part of this conversation, because it's a conversation that I'm passionate about when it comes to women's political participation in political processes. And I think even while I'm here, just reflecting on the 30 years post the Beijing Platform for Action conversation. So I think for me, first of all, it is sad that currently we are yet to even get to 50% of women's political participation and representation in the African continent, because we are at 12,113. I think, that is the last study I read from Africa Barometer sometime early last year. And a research also done in partnership with International IDEA. So the fact that just across the whole continent, women represent 24%. So we're not yet at even 50%. And also looking at a continent like Africa, where the median age is 20. When you look at representation of both young people and especially young women, it's pretty low. It's at less than 1% for young women. And I think globally, we are looking at 2.6% of young people's representation in political spaces. That is young people below 30 years. Again, that is a study by Africa Barometer. That's data from Africa Barometer. And so that begs the question of why are we looking at such a low representation when it comes to politics? So in my country, Kenya, the statistic is pretty much the same, because for a long time now, just tracking the last 3 elections, we are still at 24%. And the bare minimum is supposed to be 30% according to our Kenyan constitution, that says we shouldn't have more than 2/3 of the same gender in our own parliament. But for the last 3 elections, I think we've been at below 23%. And for young women has been below 1%, yeah. So for me, personally, I did run for office when I was 22. And I think I always say that I don't even think there's any training that can prepare you enough for running for politics. As in, I don't think there's sufficient information that you get when you're running for political office, and especially that is tailored to the community that you're in or you're running for office in. So I had just joined campus when I decided to run for office, and this had been after staying at home for about 2 years fundraising for my school fees, because my own parents were not able to take care of my school fees going to university. And so when I did declare that I'm running for office, I think for me, it was quite a huge shock to my family, my relatives, my well-wishers who had contributed heavily to fundraising for my school fees. And the fact that I was taking a break from campus, because running for office can be quite tedious. The meetings, that you have to engage in on a day-to-day, it was so hard to sit in class and concentrate. And especially if you've been able to witness how highly charged politics in Africa is. Most of the time I would sit in class, I'm trying to concentrate, and people are pulling me left, right, and center, phone calls here and there. There's a meeting, you need to speak to people here. There are young people here you need to speak to. We've gathered women here. The member of parliament is around. I think you can ride in his meeting to get to talk about your agenda. So it became so hard to actually concentrate in class. So I decided to, take actually a break completely and run for office. But then, with my declaration that I'm running for office, I actually lost my scholarship, and I lost the major part of the support from the well-wishers, because for them, for majority of them, it appeared that I didn't take my education seriously. I didn't take my education seriously enough, and that I would probably use my school fees and inject the money in politics. So I lost the scholarship. And for me, that raised the stakes for me. I poured myself out in that campaign. I don't even think I have poured myself out in anything in my life. Like, I did pour myself out in that campaign, because I knew if I don't win for becoming the next member of county assembly, I had nowhere else to go, because now I couldn't go back to campus. How would I face my parents? How would I face my relatives? Because life had changed for everyone, As a 22-year-old, I was still living with my parents. And so home ceased to be a safe space for them, because we had visitors streaming in from 5 a.m. Guys, the women who are going to the market, they're passing by, they're saying, oh, hey, we heard you're running for office. Like, we had, the number of things even my own parents had to deal with, there are people who would ask you for money, and because I didn't have money, there are people who would even come with children, like sick children, to our home, and they're like, my child is about to die, please help me. I know you said you don't have money to give, but I know you have the networks. Like, people would bring their sick children to my home. So the stakes for me were too high, and my dad, who had a position in church. So my dad is really, my dad is funny, because he doesn't like ironing his shirts. As long as his shirt is clean, he'll just wear it and go to church. And so, even the scrutiny in church in terms of, just look at his dad, look at her dad, the way he dresses, the scrutiny in terms of how much my parents were giving in terms of tithe and offering in church. So my parents quit going to church. They had to take a break from going to church. But then most importantly, I think for my mom, her biggest concern was on the violence that is meted on politicians, and especially female politicians. So this one time I received a message, and that was after I had now been declared that I'm going to be on the ballot. So that was past the nomination process. Now people are sure that I'm going to be on the ballot. And so the stakes again go very high, because you could be the reason someone loses the election, because the margins for member of county assembly seats are pretty much very low. So someone could lose that seat with just 300 votes. So you can imagine, if you have 1,000 votes, you could be the reason someone doesn't win that seat. So once people are sure you're going to be on the ballot, so when you look at the politics of intimidation, the politics of competition, people are always trying to edge you out. And it's so sad that for other candidates, violence is part of their strategy. So I received this text, and someone literally said that if I go to campaign the next day, they'll insert bottles inside my vagina. And so that, it shakes me. And I decide I'm not going to go and campaign for about a week or two, because number one, I don't know what that means. Yeah. So for that particular week, guys were just coming at home and guys were calling me for meetings, and I'm not turning up for meetings because I'm afraid, what if, like, what if it's true? And what if it happens? Because for most women, groping, like, those are things we've had, and those are things we've also experienced through other candidates. But then for me, I decide, you know what, I'm going to have more of my friends join my security detail. So I had some of my classmates, because I didn't have enough resource in terms of to pump into my security. And that's another thing. There's so much resource that you have to spend in funding your own security for you to be able to move around every other day. And sometimes you don't budget for it, you see. You don't budget for goons. I don't know what they're called in your country, but in my country, it's hard to know how much you're going to spend on goons. Like these are informal security that always have to walk around with you, and they're ready to defend you at whichever cost. Yeah. So I had 4 of my friends who are part of my security detail. But then the challenge with that is one morning, because I used to wake up pretty much early to target the people who are going to the market, like at 5 a.m., the women who are going to the market to go buy their goods for their small businesses, because I didn't have the resource to, to just come around during the day, and guys have mobilized everyone for me, and I just have to talk in the big cars. I just used to walk every day. I just used to canvass with my friends, with my family, with the women around me. I just used to walk, knock doors. But then I had to start my campaign early at 5 a.m. Then I go back home for breakfast. Then again, I hit the streets from 8 a.m. So one morning, let me just not say the name of one of the security detail. He didn't turn up at home at around 5, because he used to come home at 5. So he didn't come home, and I wondered why, because I didn't receive any communication from him. And so at around 6, when there's a bit of light outside, I decided to just leave without him. Yeah. And I went to campaign without a very strong security detail. And that was the first day that I almost got stripped. Yeah, because someone tried to literally pull down my skirt when I was addressing a crowd. And the fact that even people around me were telling me not to scream because I will look like a weak candidate, that was quite shocking to me. And later on, I went to report the matter to the police station, and the police officers asked me which party I represented and which area I was attacked in, and whether that area is popular with the political party I represent. But the fact that it had to start from which political party do I represent, which area was I in, which popular political party, which is that area popularly supporting political party X. And then I was a new candidate in the game. And then even the comments they were making that, oh, you should be married now, you should be in school now, even the comments they were making, they didn't even take me as a serious candidate, And I think for me, the fact that I didn't get help when I went to report this case, that's when I knew I'm on my own. I knew I have to take my security matters very, very seriously, because number one, I would be collateral damage. I would not make news because I was not a popular political figure. There's some popular female politician in my country, whether it is Honorable Martha Karua, whether it's Honorable Millie Mabona, my favorite mentor. There's some female politicians, if something happens to them, they become a news item. But for new entrants, especially young women, who knows you, yeah? And another thing is the fact that as young women, you're not socialized to consider politics as a career, the way young women are socialized to consider politics as a career, even from the university space, yeah? So that also becomes a challenge to getting your own peers to support you. Majority of the young women, who are my peers even in school, it was very hard for them to come to my political rallies because they were like, oh my God, what if my mom sees my picture? What am I going to say? Oh, I cannot retweet that content. I never talk about politics, so even just wearing a t-shirt, my own t-shirt, they're just like, what am I going to tell my mom? Like, what was I doing? They think I'm in school. So also you do realize that as a young woman, you don't have a strong enough social capital that is able to support your campaigns. as opposed to right now. Right now, I'm in my 30s. I've been able to build a bit of a network that if I run again, I have at least a bit of a stronger support base that can come through for me. But back then, I could not even rely on my friends. Yeah. And then three, in terms of just rallying resources to run for office for young people and especially young women.
Right.
So when you look at our cultural norms, so someone like me, it's hard for me to inherit like land. So my father never gave me land, but my father did give my brothers land. So it means that even when it comes to collateral, my brothers are ahead of the game. They could turn in the land for resources. I don't have any land to turn in for resources because when our land was split, in my culture, women are not supposed to be given land. And that's pretty much mostly in most African cultures. It is men who are given land as inheritance. Women are not given land because, of the notion that first of all, you'll be married and go off to live with another person. So ideally, you'll be back here to tend for this land. So I don't have land. So that was also another thing in terms of not having like ready resource for collateral. And I think for me, I'd also like to speak to, like social media, the bullying on social media. And I think it is even worse. It's even worse now because shame has become the new commodity, especially like in the digital market. Because if you look at the people, the bullies on the digital platform, the more shameful the content is, the more it has the highest likes. The more it has the highest likes, the more they have, the more they have, whether it is retweets, followership, and the more they can use that to actually say, you know what, I have a platform that is the most viewed platform, or if you want to advertise with me. But if you look at the kind of content that, the bullies churn, it's content that actually shames women more than shaming men, yeah? So, and when you go and report, like some of the content that has been shared about you, you do realize even with our police system, how is, you quickly realize that we have a gap in terms of investigating political violence. So how do you store that data? So I'll come and show you like, hey, this is my phone, there's XYZ. Then how do you store that data? So there's a gap in that in terms of reporting that. And if I look at also, so just 1 minute, if I look at also our cybersecurity act in the country, it has not expanded enough to include new forms of violence, not necessarily just political violence, but new forms of violence like revenge porn. You see what people share nowadays. How is that captured, investigated? So even our cybersecurity acts do not give proper provisions in terms of how you can go with that. And I think lastly, what I also took away that has formed part of the work that we also do at Badili is the fact that we also don't investigate enough violence meted on female political mobilizers. We did a study in 2022 that we've turned into a film that was launched last year at Westgate here in Kenya, and it's called The Women Kingmakers. And it's because we also don't track violence against female political mobilizers. Majority of the campaigners are women, majority of the voters are women. And anytime violence faces any political candidate, whether it's a man, whether it is a woman, the campaigners are usually the first line of defense. They're the ones who will tell you, don't come to the community, the ground, like it's not safe for you. By the time they're telling you that, they have been attacked because they support you, yeah? So I think that's also another area that we are heavily focusing on in terms of tracking violence meted on politically active women and not just female candidates. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Bina. So there's just a lot to unpack, and especially from the personal experiences that you've shared. It really syncs with some of the things that Ms. Wolf shared earlier as the impact of of gender-based violence on women, political participation, and democracy in general. And your experience really just reinforces that message on various levels, from physical violence, the impact in terms of voter apathy, the different social issues that are connected to this, be it face-to-face or in in the cyberspace, issues around resources, resource availability, and the likes. Just so many things that you know, I couldn't even imagine myself, which just ties back to what you said earlier, that nothing prepares you for the reality of being a frontliner as a young woman in the political arena. We're going to just and so thank you so much, yes, for sharing. Lots of people appreciating both you and Ms. Bizuwok in the chat section. We will take 10 minutes just to 10 minutes for 2 questions to the panelists, one to Ms. Bizuwok and one to Ms. Bina, and then before we move to the next part of our exchange, which will now focus on the solutions. So we are open for 2 questions from the floor. Maribel, please, you can help. If there's a question that has already come up, you can just read it. Anybody, Maribel or Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm trying to see in the Q&A, there's nothing.
All right.
Please, I'd like to invite you all to just send in your questions in the chat box. You can send them in English, in French, in Arabic, or in Portuguese.
Right.
So we have one question for Mrs. Bina. What do you see as the major hindrances to achievement of Kenya's 2/3 principle in the National Assembly, and what can be done to realize the principle?
Right. So I do think that this question is more solution oriented. So we can tackle this in the second part, which has to do with the strategies, you know. But oh, did you win?
Yeah, we have another question. Sorry,
Yeah.
for Ms. Bina as well. What do you see as the major hindrances to achievement of Kenya's 2/3 principle in the National Assembly? So I guess it's the same question here.
Yeah.
But yeah, but here he's talking about the hindrances. So I guess this could be a way to...
Okay.
Oh, I can go ahead and respond.
Yes, please.
Oh. So unfortunately, I did not win the election, but I never like to say that I lost. I always prefer to say that I didn't get enough votes to be declared the winner, because I did get a substantial number of votes. But then I came out with very, very rich experiences that have informed the kind of work that I currently do at Badili, and even my passion for mentorship, and some of the things that I had really, really wanted to achieve. Because when I ran, I saw a gap in terms of providing new perspectives in terms of what could be done in my community, providing new ideas. Because as young people, I always say that we might not have the financial resources that senior politicians have, but we have ideas, we have our numbers, and it's important to use our numbers as a political capital to push for the priorities that we want to see. So I've been able to translate that to the work that Badili Africa currently does when it comes to cultivating the political engagement of grassroots women who engage in merry-go-rounds. We have conversations that take place in salons. We call it transformative gossip, where like women spend so much time in the salon, you can as well engage in transformative political conversations. I'd like to speak to the 2/3 and also to honor the, my seniors in the space who really worked hard on pushing the 2/3 gender bill in Parliament. I think we have CREW as an organization where we have Ms. Wangeshi and her team. We have Daisy from Contrast with her team as well. I mean, there's been, many women who pushed for the 2/3 gender bill. We haven't seen the fruition of it. And I think even with our former Chief Justice, Honorable David Maraga, he did give an advisory to dissolve Parliament before he left office, which is an advisory that is still live. And I think even last year, I did enjoin other petitioners in terms of us dissolving Parliament. But I'd love to say that where I see a gap when it comes to the bill is we haven't made the conversation political enough, especially at the community level, because there has not been and there is no political cost to the politicians who've boycotted supporting and voting for that bill. What do I mean? What I mean is, when the politicians go back to the community, is there any woman who's calling them out on that bill? So the local woman in the community, what is their understanding of that particular bill? Because I know we push the bill as CSOs. I know we push the bill as lawyers, as institutions. But then for the politicians, because we also had very many politicians who didn't turn up the first time, so there was no quorum for the bill, number one. And then number two, we even had even female politicians who didn't support and vote for the bill the second time because they were not even in parliament that day. But then when you go back to your community, who's calling you out that, you know what, you say you support the women transformative agenda. Where were you on this particular day? There has to be a political cost to politicians who keep on shortchanging us when it comes to priorities that affect women. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Bina. I am so glad that we're all here sharing these experiences, and I'm happy that the third panelist has joined us, Ms. Halima Ismail Ibrahim. We're so thankful that you are here with us this afternoon. Ms. Halima Ismail Ibrahim is the former chair of the National Independent and Electoral Commission of Somalia. She has, again, a ton of experience on these issues. We've worked on different platforms, especially the African, the All African Election Management Bodies Forum. We've engaged, and she has over 11 years of experience, both in and out of Somalia, on different issues relating to approaches and systems in the developed world. She's done a lot of work at the grassroots levels. She also co-chaired the technical committee for vetting members of the parliament and the National Constitution Assembly that elected the elders in Somalia. She has chaired, she also, has established a long-term platform for women leadership in political processes. And she's a founder of, founding member of the Somali Women Leadership Initiative. So she's here with us today, and we're happy to have you. And we'll just want to hand over the floor to her to share her experience about the issues we're discussing, but also just reflect on what really, in her opinion, explains this, both the existence and the persistence of gender-based violence in electoral and political spaces. There was one question from Ms. Bizuwok, and we'll come back to that question after Ms. Halima's intervention. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much for all of you. And I am glad to be part of this meeting. And I came a little bit late, but I was following since I came. And as my colleague explained it, I'm the former chair of Election Commission. I have been in that position for 8 years. And after that, now I am working with the civil society and to really benefit about my experience, especially in women participation and youth participation. And we started working already, and we have been engaging with the universities in order to give awareness the young generation, especially young women who are educated. And because my 8 years of experience, and the most thing that we are lacking was to communicate with the community and to explain and to make them aware their responsibility, and also give women opportunity that they can themselves organize and understand, because we have seen, and in the voting voting places, several places that have been voting in Somalia, the long lines mostly are women, but those who are elected, they are electing a male. And we wanted to explain them why this is happening. So we are very involved in that issue. As my colleague was saying, lacking blood. It is
We seem to be having some connectivity issues.
those who are voting are women, those who are not benefiting are women.
Mm.
So that question we have to ask ourselves, where it went wrong, what we are missing. How can we understand and go out of this situation? That is what I would like to discuss and find solutions for that. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
can
so
come
much.
later on, yeah.
Yes, no. Thank you so much for interjecting there. And I think that the question you just asked just nicely leads us to the second part of our exchange, which is more policy oriented. There was a question in the chat section for Madame Bizawork, who had shared about the impact of gender-based violence on women's participation in democracy. And a few questions related to that. One just has to do with what is, in your opinion, is the most significant. I think that would also, if you can just link your response to that question with how it can be addressed, and also talk about, your reflections and some of the thoughts you had concerning the strategies that women have either used or need to use in order to navigate this delicate political space that continues to close on them despite their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. In my experience, and I have been working for a long time. I started my journey of working being a lecturer at the university, and then being in the middle of war, civil war, and then now we are in the process of getting peace and stability and form a government. What I am seeing is, after the war, or within the war, women in Somalia, I can give you the experiences that I have in Somalia. Women, they were organizing themselves. They were the ones who really struggled a lot, and in order to get out of this civil war and form a government. At the beginning, the first government formation, women were strong. They had position. They were participating in every angle. They got space. Male were giving space at that time because they were needed. They were the ones who can go everywhere. They were the ones who were raising the children. They were the ones who can go out and work. So they were needed. But now, recent governments, and women are not needed because male became more strong, and they understood that leading the political arena is becoming someone getting rich, and they found out that they don't need any more women. And now, if I see, when they are nominating committee, when they are nominating and officials of the government, there's lack of women. And in the side of the women, I see that they became more passive. They are not aggressive. They are not struggling what they what they worked for. but we are watching. And we reach it as a Somali now to see that all the structures, they're very, 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 very few men. When they nominate 20 male, maybe they will nominate one woman. And why this is happening, we have to discuss that issue. And to go out it's knowledge, awareness. And we are not linked each other. And every country of Africa is isolated. There's no a relationship between women. We have women who are very educated, very knowledgeable, very experienced, and we cannot benefiting from their and talents and their education and their experience. We need a circle. We need to form a circle of women educated, women experienced, women who has been struggled, women who had promoted, women who has been succeeded. We must find that circle and start educating in our country, our women. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Madam Bizuwark, if you can cue in on that, share your thoughts as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. I see very important questions coming on the chat section. Unfortunately, we will not be able to go through all of those, but maybe just to quickly come in on what are the strategies, some of the strategies to manage and to navigate and to resist all these challenges. I want to look at that in two ways. One is, from my knowledge, what are some of the things that women have done to navigate and to resist. But I also want to share what we as an institution, because we also have institutional responsibilities, what we've tried to do and what are the challenges that we faced. Now, for women, to my knowledge, I know some women have tried to build alliances, especially women who were victims of violence. It's not a very usual strategy, but I know there are some who have tried to do that, maybe in very, very small, intimate circles. Another important strategy is working with civil society organizations that are working on these issues, that have experience and capacity on these issues. They provide shelters for women victims of all sorts of violence, not just elections, counseling, legal aid, and other support. So CSOs working on these issues, but also CSOs that are focused on gender equality, advocacy, human rights, and so on. So making these connections is very important. And as institutions, we have to reach out for those and try to support those mechanisms. And I would like to mention here some of the human rights CSOs that we have here in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association, Association for Women's Sanctuary and Development, Network of Ethiopian Women Associations, and these are just three of many. And then on the intersectionality side of things, we have similarly CSOs focusing on disability and looking at women with disabilities and how they go through some of these challenges. Now, as an institution, I would say we've had two phases of addressing this issue, and I think that we are in a second phase where we're trying to address things more systematically and in a more structured way. So as an institution, obviously, the first thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is ourselves understanding what are the issues of violence against women during elections, how are they manifested, how does it spread across the election cycle? So those studies will continue. We've done some. We are in the process of doing two assessments regarding IDPs and disability in general, but we will also be looking at women with disabilities, women IDPs, and what are the challenges, excuse me, that they face. We've also done a gender audit of political parties. We hope to repeat that to see, have things improved, have things gotten worse, should we be doing something else? But it was a good baseline that showed us that, most of the political parties do not have policies on these issues. There are many attitudinal issues with many of the political parties. So, and we've done a lot. We've done some things, maybe not a lot in between. So it's important for us now to see what has changed or improved or even gotten worse. We did have a provision, incentives. We provided incentives to political parties to increase number of women candidates, number of women in leadership, and we're talking about women, so I'll just confine myself to that, but it's also incentives for having persons with disabilities as candidates, persons with disabilities as leaders. And we did recently, actually, we can share some of these assessments if anybody is interested, an assessment of whether these incentives provided to political parties was in any way successful to the intended objectives. And although there were some attempts by few political parties, it's sad to say that the objectives were not really achieved through this incentive. So what are we doing about it? So we're reconsidering this incentive provision, and the accountability and the tracking, how we can strengthen that. So it's not just about seeing numbers and then just giving out the money, but tracking how they go about it. But we've gone beyond that, and we are suggesting mandatory quotas for women as candidates, as leaders, and not just women, as I said earlier, but also candidates with disabilities, independent candidates, and so on. So so we'll see. I mean, we're trying to ease some of the requirements for registration for candidacy, more for women. We have, even internally, we've just developed a sexual harassment, anti-sexual harassment policy for our own staff, and building, awareness around that, and tracking how we manage that through the institution. So it's not just a problem out there. It's also something that we need to look at ourselves as an institution. A lot of trainings and awareness workshops for ourselves, for our partners, CSOs, parties, and we hope to develop a gender equality and social inclusion policy based on these assessments, looking at the recommendations. And we have elections coming up in 2026. So looking at, how can we make those elections more gender sensitive, less violence ridden, and more participatory, and so on and so on. So an enabling policy and legal framework, it's critical as a start. And then our strategic plan also has as a central cross-cutting issue this whole issue of gender equality and inclusion. We have started to look at how we manage risks. We can't do it all. There are others who have a responsibility. So it's also looking at our partnerships with not just CSOs, the Human Rights Commission, but also those government bodies that have a responsibility to protect candidates, man or woman, and especially so women. So yeah, and then looking at our grievance hearing mechanisms to see how violence against women during elections is reported, how we track that. We also encourage, and I think some of them might be among the participants, we encourage CSOs that conduct election observation to monitor some of these things during observation. A lot of public service around announcements as part of our civic and voter education programs. What should women do when they are faced with violence? Who do they report it to? What kind of service are they expected? So there's a whole host of things that we are trying to do.
Thank you for sharing those. I've noted quite a lot. Some of those which were shared by Ms. Halima about the importance of just education, raising awareness, and grassroots mobilization, which also ties with what Ms. Bizuwak has said about working with CSO organizations, building alliances, even the institutional response. There's just so much to learn from the NEBE institutional response. Target is one thing that really stands out to me is just working across the electoral cycle and making sure that the responses are targeted, but also tailoring responses to meet the needs of vulnerable groups like internally displaced persons and persons with disabilities who are already facing like double, at this in this way. Discrimination, incentivizing. I would love to read more about that, the various forms of the incentives that were used and how, and just to follow up on the impact of such incentives so that we can see how those can be, scaled up or implemented in other areas. Mandatory quotas are issues that continues to be pushed for. I think Ms. Bina also talked about that to some degree, and it's unfortunate that the statistics still remains very, very abysmal when we look at that. An enabling legal framework, having a strategic plan that is quite gender sensitive at all levels is also extremely key. I just want to turn back to Ms. Bina. How do these recommendations resonate with you? What are some of the things that you learned? Just two things in the interest of time that really you think would have made your experience different, and looking back in terms of lessons learned, but just one lesson learned and maybe one innovative approach that you think you would give as advice to young aspiring women in the young women who are aspiring to be active in the political space, or just engaging other young women in this area. You're muted, please.
I think I would say, first of all, as much as it's quite challenging to run for political office, it's also quite insightful and exciting in different ways, because you also get to understand your community in ways that you would not have understood your community that way. Like, there's so many things you learn from different people, because every other day you're interfacing with people. So I would say, please run for office. And why I'm saying please run for office is because given the solutions that have already been outlined, I would probably even speak to one of them. Most political parties do not have the sexual harassment policies, so it makes it very hard to report your political party. And especially given that political parties are usually vehicles that carry you through to parliament. And so I think it's very, very important to hold different actors accountable, because then this will ensure that many more women run for office. It's important to encourage women to run for office, because even as we talk about 30% representation, in most countries, we don't even have 30% of women running for office. In my own country last year, we had about 16,100 candidates on the ballot, from the presidential candidate to the member of county assembly. And whether you are running as an independent candidate or you are running up, within a political party, we had about 16,000 candidates, and only about 2,000 of those were women. So we didn't even have about even 30%. So we only had about 11% of women running for office. So you can imagine, even if all the women won, we still would not have met our 2/3 gender rule, because even 50%, yeah. So already, given the number of women who were on the ballots, there was no way we would have achieved our 2/3 gender rule. And it's a situation across the continent. That is one. But second, Prof, I think it's important for us to strengthen the solidarity and network for women and candidates who have either run for office and lost, or those who have run again and have lost the second time. Because someone who's run for office, the likelihood of how they'll react to even some of the challenges they faced the first time is pretty much different. So I see many of the women, especially young women who run for office for the first time, they don't run again for the second time. Most of my peers who we bring together with, and even some of them that we've been able to track through the work that we do with Siasa Place, Tribeless Youth, they don't run again for office. So it's important to journey with them post the campaign. So I find that there's a lot of gaps when it comes to journeying with both female candidates who've won, and even the ones who have lost, because even the ones who have won, in terms of them being very solid in understanding their mandate, and also being able to execute on that particular mandate effectively, because sometimes inclusion does not necessarily mean representation. So I think it's very, very important to see how do we support both those who get elected and also the ones who don't get elected. How do we journey with them, or how do we even learn from their experiences? And lastly, I think we have to continue, the advocacy campaigns have to continue, because every day we're pushing back against patriarchal norms. And this has to begin from the campus level, in the universities that we work in, to support young women's participation in leadership at the campus level. It's even hard to get a young woman to run for the presidency of the student council. So you can imagine, very few of them are running for office, but I'm glad that we are seeing the face of the student council shift a bit, and having more faces of young women. And we need to encourage that. We need to continue encouraging, understanding governance processes from that particular level, because we have seen that this has been the journey of most of the senior political figures in the national space, where they were able to transition from student governments to national politics. So their leadership journey was honed in their campus space. So I think it's important for us to be very intentional in terms of mentoring, and also lastly, learning from the senior women who've gone before us, and documenting, some of the women that have really, really come to admire over time. There's very, very scanty information, whether it's Chelagat Mutai, whether it is, the women from Zimbabwe and other countries, whether it's Ethiopia, that really, really inspire me. You really have to dig and dig and dig for that particular information. While you have information for other, whether it is senior men in the struggle, that is really, really easily accessible. So I think it's important to document and simplify this information to serve as inspiration for most of us who are really looking up to the mentors in the space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bina, for that reflection. And I think it speaks directly to one of the questions that was on the platform, like how effective is women's solidarity, given the fact that women do not necessarily always vote for women candidates. And so I guess it really just strengthens the point that you're making on the need of solidarity, especially candidates, those that have run, succeeded and or not, just to, again, share experience, reinforce resilience, and the need to continue to bounce back and to push through. We have 10 more minutes before we wrap up. I can take one question, and then before we get the 1 minute concluding remarks from the different panelists, just their final thoughts on what we're talking about. So there's a question here that says, should women abandon the stereotype of organizing themselves. No, okay, well, this is a contribution. Women should abandon the stereotype of organizing themselves in associations. Some women leaders of associations should stop running for their own benefit rather than for the benefit of their majority. Good point, well taken. Any other question that
that cuts across, even for men as well.
yes,
Guys,
exactly. I was going to say that, yeah. I think more so for men. But yeah. Any other question though? If not, we would turn over to the panelists for some final reflections, and then we get our announcement. But I do have a question from Miss Bizzlework, and I think that is because what she said really just caught my attention. I hope she's still online. Yes, she is. About the incentives, like were they financial incentives that were given to women, and how were the beneficiaries identified? You know.
Yeah, it was financial. It
Okay.
was financial with the objective of addressing, like I said, candidacy and leadership and membership of not just women, but persons with disabilities as well. So it was financial. And I mean, we've learned our lessons as well in terms of maybe what were the things that we could have done better in terms of tracking these financial distribution, but also understanding more how they actually went about it, recruiting women and recruiting persons with disabilities. So there have been challenges and limitations on both sides. We've made some of these political parties accountable for their actions. Some of them have had to give back the money. Some of them the process is still ongoing. But at the same time, we've also taken, like I said, the mandatory quota and some provisions targeting easing restrictions for women candidates and persons with disability candidates. So we just finished that assessment, and we've had discussions, inputs, but we can share for anyone who is interested, both the assessment around the incentives, but also the previous ones, the gender audit of political parties, BAWE, and it's not just a NEBE project. I mean, we have invited political parties themselves, the wings of women wings within political party structures, civil society organizations working on these issues, and they've also provided inputs and thoughts in the whole process.
All right. Thank you very much. We would really be grateful to have to lay a hand on that document. We do have quite a number of students within our Masters in Electoral Policy and Administration program who are working on who would find this quite useful for their research. And we have some quite a number of Ethiopian students as well, but it's also relevant for comparative experiences. Other countries, some of the incentives that they have used have been lowering the cost of candidature for women, for the cost of registering female candidatures in electoral processes. That those are other forms of incentives that are being used in other countries, and so comparing this would be very interesting for us, even as an institution. We'll turn over to Ms. Halima. And just to hear her final thoughts on all of this, one strong message that she wants to us to take home as we wrap up today's webinar. Over to you, Ms. Halima.
And thank you very much. And really, in being the few minutes that I was in this Zoom, and I can assure that I gained a lot on my experience of and how women are tracking, and listening to my other colleagues somehow we are far behind. And in the other hand, we are really doing and well. That's what I would say. And I will use all the knowledge that I gained today and practice to my in the field. And what I have seen was, in some countries are more advanced than us. When you look the organizations which are existing in the country, especially women organization, and when you look in women organizations in the legal aspect and other fields of education, and what we are doing as a group of women now, and how can we engage our young educated women come in the field. But because we have seen, when the young women show and that the government led by more male are not giving opportunity, they changed their activities. They went direction to business. Everybody is going to business. And if we all go to the business, and it will not give us opportunity to go to the other angles in the system. The first thing is that we are doing is to go to the universities, engage women and work the issues that are very important to us, and make an interlink or relation among the women organizations, whether they are in the business, whether they are in the law, whether they are in the education, in the military, everywhere, to coordinate themselves and start together and working. That is what we, and while we are organizing ourselves internally, then we need the support from other women organizations in Africa. Those who are succeeded, we want to get their experience, and we can share also our experience. So what we are missing is the link between among ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts about the need for a multi-sectoral and cross-generational engagement with amongst women and across the different generations and across the different sectors of the society. Somali is a very unique context, and we definitely salute all the work that you've been doing personally and as an institution, over the network of women that you're working with at the grassroots level, which is where the heavy lifting needs to take place, and that you continue to do quite relentlessly. Thank you for that. Miss Bina, one final thought as we wrap up, and then we'll turn over Miss Bina, then Miss Izuwok, and then we would close.
I think a lot has been said. Allow me to say thank you, because many times we don't have the convergence of academia, civil society, and the community. So we all speak in our own silos. So this particular conversation here has been particularly important to me. So I just want to appreciate that, because many a times, and I know we have the big conversation, which is true in terms of decolonizing knowledge. So you find that even for the grassroots women who have very, very important information, sometimes because it has not passed through the learning institutions, so it is valued differently. So I do appreciate having a convergence of, particular spaces like this that speak to how then do we co-create and come together and figure out what are the solutions going forward. I also just want to appreciate what I've also been able to learn. And I think for all of us who are here, I always say that the most important office is the office of the citizen. It's not even the office of the, the president, the office of the governor, woman representative, a member of county assembly. If all of us occupy our own offices effectively, it's much easier to hold the powers that be to account in delivering the solutions that we've been able to even speak to here. And so it's to encourage all of us to be accountability champions. You might not be running for office, but the people who end up running and winning political office, they affect our lives. The choices they make, majority of us, if they're young, they're going to live much longer with those choices. God forbid something happens. And the fact that most of the guys who are making these decisions are actually very senior, because the average age of a politician, especially in the African continent, is 63 years. And the average age of a citizen is 30 years. So I think it's to encourage all of us to occupy our spaces effectively and contribute to pushing for the solutions that are discussed in powerful platforms like this. If it's academia, let's write, let's document, let's visibilize most of this, whether it's the electoral institutions. I'm so glad for the work that Ms. Bizuwak is doing. Very few women who are at the helm of electoral institutions, like the work that she's doing. Ms. Halima, thank you for your experiences. And I had a good time here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Bina. We have been really honored to have you as well. Ms. Bizuwak, for your final remarks.
Thank you so much. I think likewise, I'm so glad to have met Ms. Bina. So this is an opportunity to continue an intergenerational networking. And Halima, I'm so pleased to connect with you again. I think the last time we met was in South Africa, I think. And thank you for organizing this, and it's been a pleasure to be part of the discussions. Maybe just one or two concluding remarks, so to say. And the first one is, we've said it 2-3 times, but I think it's critical, and it's this whole enabling environment that we need to create for some of these things to materialize, the policy framework, legal framework, and making sure that it's enforced and accountability is tracked, and also an institutional approach to some of these issues. Second, I think it's not just about having more women candidates, more women voters, more women leaders in political parties or politics, but it's also more attention to these issues by the men that are already leaders and candidates and so on. So it's a collective responsibility. Obviously, we have to do more to gain our space in that collective responsibility. And then the third, I've already said this, but I think it's important to stress that understanding the barriers and providing support to women in the many ways that they may require expanding opportunities is critical. And then the last point, because both Halima and Ms. Bina referred to links and working in silos, I think it's good that we recall, and some of you may know this, we have an association of African electoral authorities. Yes. So this is one agenda that we can and should be doing something about, or talking more about it in that association. I know there was a recent gathering of women election commission chairpersons gathering in Ghana. I think it was.
Yes.
Chairperson was there as well. So those are avenues we can take some of these discussions forward. And then obviously there's the global Association of World Election Bodies, and Halima, I think that's when we met in South Africa. It's a bit broader and bigger, but still, I'm sure so many lessons that that are available in this association to go around. And maybe we also need to think about having some sub-regional networks and associations for those of us that are similar in many ways. So thank you very much. I have enjoyed. I had said I had a meeting at 4. The meeting is still going, but I decided to continue here.
So much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're so grateful. Thank you so much for being here with us and for just sharing your experiences and knowledge on all these very critical issues. I'm going to turn over to the head of the MEPA program, Professor Lorenzo Gaspari, for his closing remarks. And I thank everybody who has been here and all the questions that have been asked in the different in the chat section. We've taken note of those. Some of you are requesting the recording. We have a technical team. We would look into that. But for now, I will hand over to the head of the master's program, Professor Gaspari. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melvin, and thank you, everyone. It was a very insightful webinar. I learned really a lot, especially from your the stories that you tell to us, but also concerning the substance, concerning the possibilities, the limited possibilities somehow, but also you trace well the path where we should that we should take. And for sure, it's the path that we would like to take with this project, with this process of Chivo's Africa. So this was just one webinar, an important one. In the context of this project, we'd like to remember next week we will have another one, and then in general to follow our initiatives together with UNITAR and International IDEA. I will not take more of your time, but really thank you so much for participating. Special thanks to the panelists, which were fantastic. Really. Hopefully to see you soon, to work together soon again. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Lorenzo. Many thanks, Ms. Halima, for being with us. Thank you, Ms. Bina, for your time. Thank you, Ms. Vizulark. And to everyone who joined us today, thank you. And we'll be sending announcements about our next webinar by email, as well as please remember the deadlines to apply if you're interested in taking the Masters in Electoral Policy and Administration, or just some of the modules. Visit our website, apply before the deadline. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time. Have a wonderful afternoon, and let's continue the engagement at different levels. Bye for today.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.